It's time to do another video in history, and I love history. And what are we going to be talking about in this video? U.S. military intervention in Honduras during the Banana Wars. What was the Banana Wars? For those who are unfamiliar with that, the Banana Wars was a long series of U.S. military interventions in the Latin America and the Western Hemisphere, mostly from 1898 to 1934. During that time, the United States engaged in military invasions in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, Honduras, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Panama. In this video, though, we're going to be specifically talking about the military interventions of the United States in Honduras. The U.S. military officially intervened in Honduras in 1903, 1907, 1911, 1912, 1919, 1924, and 1925. So, in understanding the role of the United States, the history invading Honduras and the other countries in the region, we have to take a look back at what led up to those things. It was around the 1890s when the United States and American companies started intervening more in Latin America. These newly independent countries, who were previously Spanish colonies, were weak and very poor and underdeveloped and fragile. And by the 1890s, American fruit companies started arriving on the scene in Central America to buy up land and dominate the banana market. The United States fought Spain in a war in 1898, kicking Spain out of the hemisphere, and Spain lost its last two colonies in the Americas, Cuba and Puerto Rico. And with Spain out of the way, now the United States was going to be the new power, the new dominator for the region. And Central America was one of these regions that were going to come under U.S. domination. By the 1890s, as I mentioned, American fruit companies such as the United Fruit Company and Standard Fruit started arriving and buying up land in places like Guatemala and Nicaragua and Honduras. And these companies started basically using bribery and other corrupt practices to get their way in these countries. And in the case of Honduras, the United Fruit Company also was engaging in building railroads there, and they had a lot of political clout. During the early 20th century, Honduras was going through a lot of violent instability. They weren't the only country in the region. Also, Nicaragua was also going through political instability, also of different political factions fighting each other for control of their countries, which is why the United States intervened in both Nicaragua and in Honduras. Honduras went through two civil wars in the early 20th century, one in 1919 and another in 1924. And because of this instability in Honduras from essentially 1903 to 1925, American fruit companies like the United Fruit Company would call on the U.S. government to send military troops into these countries to intervene on their behalf to protect American economic interests in these countries. And the instability was a threat to it. So the U.S. military, the Marines, were sent into Honduras several times in 1903, 1907, 1911, 1919, 1924, 1925. It was during the Civil War, for example, in 1919, where the U.S. military arrived September 11th, 1919, to force a president in Honduras to step down from power. The United States tried to basically restore order on their terms that would benefit them each time. And it was a rough ride for the United States. So after the Civil War of 1924 in Honduras and the U.S. military intervention in it, Honduras, in a way, stabilized. There was no more Civil War fighting. And the Banana Wars themselves ended in the 1930s, in 1934, because of the Great Depression. The Great Depression, stock market crash of 1929, hurt the U.S. so economically it no longer had any more money for these foreign interventions at the time. And the U.S. pulled its troops out of Haiti and Nicaragua, for example, in the 1930s. So Honduras was originally coined a banana republic back in 1904, being the quintessential banana republic, an unstable country with few resources and mostly dependent on its banana exports. So after the last U.S. military intervention in Honduras in 1925, Honduras' stability was still rocky because what followed was more dictatorships and military coups over the decades, even into the 1970s. And in 1969, for example, Honduras and El Salvador even fought a war with each other called the Football War in 1969. There was not a lot of stability, but American fruit companies got their way regardless in Honduras. The reason I decided to make a video specifically about the Banana Wars and Honduras was there are other videos on YouTube about the Banana Wars and the U.S. military interventions, but not specifically on Honduras. There are some other YouTube channels, like one called The Great War, that does some excellent videos about the U.S. invasions of Haiti and the Dominican Republic back in 1915 and the U.S. invasion and occupation of Nicaragua. And the Honduras intervention was kind of lumped in some of these other videos on YouTube, but not a specific one. So I would recommend, if you want to learn more about the Banana Wars in general, definitely check out other YouTube videos about the other interventions that were done. And in conclusion, the cycle of U.S. military interventions in Honduras has, of course, not ended. As I've made a video in the past, the United States created an air base and controls an air base in Honduras ever since 1983. And the U.S. military has been doing a lot of things in Honduras in the last 39 years.